How's it going, everybody? Joey here, and today it is the end of the year, so that means it's once again time for our end of the year discussion. Woo!
Whoa!
So, like I said, this is gonna be our end of the year discussion. We're doing a game end of the year discussion. We got a couple of categories which should be on screen now. We're gonna be doing game of the year, honorable mention, best soundtrack, best story, and best visuals or graphics of the year before. That's what we'll be doing. We'll explain the categories as we get to them. Um, all right, so going into the first topic, we're gonna go with best visuals. This goes to pretty much a game that was the best looking, was with the art style, graphics, frame rate, all that kind of stuff. How it would look the best for you. And Thomas, I'm gonna let you go first.
I would say this year, for the best visuals, I would have to give it to Kirby. Specifically, Kirby in the Forgotten. Truly think that game looks amazing. Especially, like, when a lot of people point out, like, oh man, this game looks great for being on the Switch. And it's like, I personally think the Switch looks really good. Sometimes. But
Yeah.
Kirby was just amazing, and the 3D aspect new to Kirby looked really good.
All right. As for mine, it's a game I have not beaten yet. So it did take the cake for me in terms of visuals. It's Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope. This of course being the sequel to the first Mario plus Rabbids game. It's probably what y'all weren't expecting. But
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that.
no, yeah, it was a stellar looking game. I will say, it was between this and Splatoon 3 for me, for graphics. But for me, as well, I love Splatoon 3, and it did really nail it as well. I think I give it to Mario plus Rabbids just because it has a bit more of a variety in its art style and stuff. With Splatoon 3, like, it has its art style and it runs with it. But Mario plus Rabbids, you got like a beach, you got a forest, you got cave sections, you got this like icy museum you go through. There's all these different locations with the whole space theme. Peach's castle looks better than ever. When you get to see that at the beginning of the game, it's just really solid towards the visuals. And in performance, again, go back to it being on Switch. The performance of the game is very well for how great it looks. I think that's partially just because it is a bit more of a, unlike games that are more open, like Sonic Frontiers or Legends Arceus, it's a much more closed-in game. So they know where you're going to be at, so they can really just focus in on making that one area look really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is my pick for best visuals. I will say Kirby was a great choice. It was the one it was on my list of contenders for Guiding Land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Oh,
haven't seen too much of Sparks of Hope, but from what I have seen, it does look, especially for a game featuring the Rabbids. I know, I know that game is really good, and there shouldn't be a stigma about using Rabbids, but I still think they're weird.
Yeah. But anyhow, going on to our next topic we got. So we got best story. So this is pretty much the best storyline from games we played this year or narrative. Pretty much just, was this dialogue or the plot. Doesn't necessarily have to be just like a story-driven game. You could pick a game about the rabbits if you want to, and if you just thought it was really funny, there you go. I guess I'll go first on this one for me for best story. And I am going to pick Sonic Frontiers. Big
Wow.
shocker. So Frontiers, for me, this game's been hyped up a lot, and it delivered, especially on the story front. I think the story is the strongest part of the game, personally. Really bringing Sonic into this new environment he's never been to before, the Starfall Islands, exploring it, figuring out the mystery of the Starfall Islands and Sage and where Eggman is, where your friends are, Sonic dealing with his own issues. But the main thing, though the plot is good, I think the main thing that really gets is the character interactions and the actual dialogue, which is mostly thanks to the writer of the comics, Ian Flynn, them hiring him on as one of the main writers for this game. Though he wasn't the only writer. I did want may not have to know there were 3 writers for this game, with Ian Flynn being one of the 3. I unfortunately don't remember the names of the other 2, but Ian Flynn was the one who focused more on the dialogue and interactions of characters, and that was what really sold the game for me, with either Sonic and Amy and kind of developing their relationship. Sonic and Knuckles we see later on, them constantly butting heads, but still they kind of have that still kind of rivalry going on. You got Sonic and Tails, they continue their like younger older brother relationship, which I really like, and they actually follow up on some plot beats from Sonic Forces, the Sonic and Tails relationship in that game, which a lot of people had issues with, which is kind of cool. I don't want to spoil too much of the story itself, but if you played the game or seen me or someone else live stream it, I think it's phenomenal. The money for me, many people, including myself, the ending of it really pulled at the heartstrings. But yeah, that's my pick for best narrative.
Yeah, I haven't got around to playing Frontiers quite yet, but of course, it's on the list. But anyhow, for my pick for best story this year, it's a really tough one because I didn't really play that many newer games this year. I kind of stuck with a lot of older games I love to play, or just played older games that I hadn't played before. But I gotta say, Pokemon Violet has to be the best story for me this year. And since the game is still fairly new, I won't go into too much of a detail on the story itself, but it starts off with like a bunch of threads, like lingering, like different threads with different like characters involved and different plot beats, but still it manages to weave them into one really solid story. And I gotta say, I think there are Pokemon games I prefer, but I think it's mostly just due to nostalgia. I actually think this is probably like one of the best Pokemon stories in a good while. But yeah, no, Violet's. I guess it's Scarlet and Violet, but personally,
Yeah.
I picked Violet.
Yeah. Now, I would say to tag on to that a bit, that was my second place, was Pokemon Violet and Scarlet and Violet for me, because I think part of it for me is just a little. So we're recording this the same day I beat the game, so it's very fresh in my mind. So I feel like I kind of need to get some time for the game to kind of settle down for me to get my final thoughts all together. But it was still a contender for a lot of the stuff I looked through tonight. And I will also agree with that. For me, very similar to Frontiers, I think they nailed the character interactions, and that was a lot of fun, especially someone like me who, since it's a voice actor in the game, I voice acted all the characters myself, and it was a lot of fun getting into the different personalities of the characters. That was a lot of fun for me, but yeah, I'll say Pokemon Violet, that was a solid choice.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, so going on to our next category is Best Soundtrack. This is going to be for the games that we thought had the best soundtrack, of course. Music, whether that's the sound design, sound effects, actual music itself, songs, background, battle themes, you name it. Thomas, I will let you lead with this one.
This one is another hard one. You have Kirby on one hand, which Kirby in the past has had like amazing soundtracks, and it was really good. But then you also have Pokemon Violet, which I think it's not only the best story of a recent Pokemon game, it definitely has to be my favorite soundtrack. Any Pokemon, but it's hard to say. I honestly, but at the same time, neither of them stick out to me as the best soundtrack of 2022. And again, I think it just goes back to I just haven't played a whole lot of newer games this year. But I'm gonna have to say inconclusive for this one.
Oh wow!
I honestly like both of them, but I can't say which one I prefer. on top of just any other games.
Interesting. Alrighty then. I guess to throw my hat in the ring then, another big shocker here. My soundtrack for this year was Sonic Frontiers again. I try my best to try not to pick Sonic Frontiers for all of them, and honestly, these were for pretty much these were the only two that I was like I picked Frontiers for, but with the best soundtrack for Sonic Frontiers. It is the only one of the very few soundtracks where I don't find myself. It's one of the few soundtracks I don't find myself skipping through if I'm just playing it. If I'm driving in the car, I'll listen to them. Pretty much any of the tracks. Sometimes in this particular mood for other ones, but stuff like "Find Your Flame," "I'm Here," "One Way Dream." There's some like the lyrical songs that really nailed it. The final boss theme, which I won't spoil the name of, but if you listen to that, is extremely good. Even though it's not a lyrical song, which has been a while since we haven't had that for a Sonic game, at least in that I could think of. So, and it really nailed it. And the soundtrack's really good, especially they took a very different direction with it, being a lot more atmospheric, Breath of the Wild, like as some people have coined it. So I will say that is definitely was a shocker for me. I was a little worried about it. I will say that 'cause we didn't get much of the soundtrack before the game came out, but it delivered, I would say. So that's why Frontiers is the best soundtrack for me.
Yeah, and I've been honestly in the car with you a lot recently, and I can definitely tell. One, I think the soundtracks from Frontiers are pretty good, but I also can attest to how much Billy enjoys that song.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been good. I'll listen a lot of the more atmospheric tracks. I'll listen to while I'm like editing or if I'm at work, my job. It's very good. Just kind of having play in the background. It's just nice atmospheric, few instruments. That's normally when I've listened more of that. Normally if I'm in the car, that's when I'm blasting like the more powerful songs, for lack of a better word. But yeah, so yeah, that's our best soundtrack. So we're going to go into honorable mentions. So this is pretty much a category for any games that either didn't make the list on any of our categories, or are games that didn't come out this year but we played and we really enjoyed. So that's kind of the honorable mentions it's going to be. So might be on this one for a little bit, but Thomas, I'm gonna let you take this one once again.
Oh well, I feel kind of weird because my past 3 were Nintendo related, and this one has nothing to do with Nintendo. But so a little bit of backstory. Recently got a good, decent PC. In November. I guess I'm dating this, but and the biggest caveat is I pretty much spent all my money, and now I have no money to spend on games. So I went to Steam and downloaded the first free game I saw, which was Team Fortress 2. And I gotta say, for a game being, God, how old is it? It came out in 2007, and so that would be how many years? 7.
About 15 years.
Yeah, about 15 years old. For a game that's nearly 15 years old, it has definitely been one of the most funnest experiences I've just had in general with gaming. Because, a little bit of backstory, I'm not too big into shooters. Like, I dabble occasionally. But for the most part, I generally stick with, like, RPGs, occasionally a point or two. But this game, it's just... You ever see something with such, like, a silly aura? Where it's just, like, it doesn't really take itself that seriously, but also does at the same time.
I get what you're saying.
So, if you have a PC that can run it, and you don't mind playing a shooter game, I would highly recommend Team Fortress 2. Quite honestly, visuals, it's a game from 2007. In terms of visuals, it's not the greatest, but it's very stylized. In story, I wouldn't say the game has a story very much, but the characters have so much personality in it, but I almost put this under soundtrack, but I was like, it didn't come out this year. But it has a really good soundtrack. Probably one of the best video game soundtracks I've ever heard. But yeah,
Hey.
for me, that goes Team Fortress 2.
Alright, I guess honorable mention. So, something a little behind the scenes thing. So, earlier today, me and Thomas went through, we made a list of all the games that we've live streamed this year, which ended up being a lot more than I thought it would be. I ended up consulting this list, especially for this honorable mentions thing. I've played a bunch of games that I've played many times before, like some of the Mario platformers and some of the RPGs. Done a lot of Sonic games. We did the Kirby marathon, a lot of different things. Also did some less favorable games like Sonic 06. But ultimately, while I was thinking about it, I couldn't land on one for my honorable mention. I kept looking through this list, but I'm like, none of these feel like it's worth the slot for me. So I ended up looking at my shelf, and I realized there's one game that I played this year that I don't think I've ever live streamed, and that is Ratchet and Clank: Tools of Destruction. So I honestly think it's the only game I've played that I did not stream this year, like at all.
Oh.
Like I've played games like not live stream them this year, but like they still be like, oh, I gotta play Mario Kart with my friends. But like I live streamed it still this year. The Ratchet and Clank Tools of Destruction, I went through and played through the whole game this year, around the summertime, and it was a lot of fun. Like it was the force of the Ratchet and Clank Future Saga, so technically it's Ratchet and Clank Future Tools of Destruction, but it was a lot of fun. It's the first Ratchet game that starts to bring a bit more of a plot into it. It's about Ratchet realizing he's the last of his kind, and he wants to learn more about his past. There's Emperor Tachyon, which is the main bad guy who's trying to hunt Ratchet down because he is the one who destroyed the rest of his species, and he wants to finish that off.
Like Kung Fu Panda 2.
Exactly. And it's fun. You have fun story, of course. You got Ratchet and Clank themselves. You have characters that come back from previous games, like Big Al, Captain Quark, of course, who's now the mayor of the new city. I've got the name of the city. The main city of the franchise. He's now the mayor, and that has a whole bunch of hijinks with it. With him being in charge, and it's a lot of fun. It's a very fun game. It still has that Ratchet Clank vibe, though it takes itself more seriously. It doesn't feel like it goes too far to that point. It's kind of what made me get back in the Ratchet series after pining over wanting a PS5 for Rift Apart, and still not being able to find a PS5. I decided to go and get the PS3 games, which I now have all of them. I haven't played all of them yet, but I do own them all now. It's hopefully you see more of that in the future. Maybe next year we'll end up playing Tools of Destruction, but yeah, that is my honorable mention. Yes, now you're gonna enter
The moment you've all been waiting for.
Yep, the game of the year. And Thomas, I'm gonna make you go first again because I'm evil.
Oh no. Well, this one I do have a definitive game of the year. And quite honestly, I gotta hand it to Legends, Pokemon Legends Arceus. This game is probably, aside from Kirby, because I was pretty hyped for Kirby, this game is probably the only game I was like super hyped for this year. Like, I had seen other games, and quite honestly, when they announced Scarlet and Violet, I was a little worried, if anything, so the opposite of hyped. But when they announced Pokemon Legends Arceus, I was super excited for this game. It's kind of an inflection point for the Pokemon series, I would say. Because, one, you have, like, the obvious, like, it's Sinnoh before Sinnoh was a thing, and it has that whole bit, and it calls back to, like, Arceus himself, Dialga, Palkia, some older characters, some more obviously referenced than others, but, it looks at, the older games, but it also like lays the groundwork for how newer games like Pokemon Violet will pretty much like be played for the next couple of like for the most part for the future of Pokemon games in general. And I think this game though no one really. I don't want to say it's underrated because it's definitely a Pokemon game, but I feel like it kind of dropped in terms of like people talking about it after, like, definitely after Violet came out, but even then, in that kind of waiting period,
Yeah.
everyone kind of played it and was finished with it. And I think a lot of people, I hope a lot of people don't take it for granted with how much, like, and I can imagine a lot of people will say, like, a lot of the stuff it introduced wasn't all that breaking and was just stuff we should have already gotten, which I can agree a little bit with, but for the most part, I think this game is very important. But on top of that, it's just a really darn good game in general. Like, the soundtrack for a Pokemon game, again, I think Violet's is a little better, but it's still pretty darn good. The story was, I did not expect. Again, I don't know what it is about the Pokemon games and these twist stories, but in general, I really enjoyed the style of this game. I think it's probably the most stylized Pokemon game. But it's because, I think it's purely because it's playing with a time period that we haven't really seen a whole lot in terms of Pokemon games. And I hope we get more in the Pokemon Legends series in general. I hope Legends kind of becomes their series to experiment, I guess, for the lack of a better term, to like kind of throw ideas out there and see what sticks, and then kind of implement them into the mainline games. All I can say is I'll leave you with this game is really good, and if you haven't played it, you should.
I would say definitely Legends Arceus was a contender for me for all the categories for the most part, probably outside of soundtrack. The soundtrack was good. It's not particularly memorable for me, but I would say it was definitely high up there for me this year, and I was been reflecting on it a lot recently. So it is not my game of the year. Now, so going to my game of the year, I thought about it a lot. There was a lot of stuff going into this one. Part of me was saying I should do Pokemon Violet because I got really into that game. I really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, I feel like I just haven't put in enough time into that game, or I've had enough time to let that game kind of settle for me to decide on that. So I end up not doing Pokemon Violet. Sonic Frontiers, that was a big one, and at one point I know I did say it was my game of the year most likely back when I finished it, but I think part of me with how the game does have a bit of a cliffhanger ending, and there's a bit of loose threads and a bit of places they could have made the gameplay better, and we're going to get the DLC next year, and I think that's going to solve a lot of those issues. So this is 2022, not 2023. So because of that, Frontiers got knocked out of it for me, and really looking back on this year, I decided that Kirby and the Forgotten Land was my game of the year. Looking back, even Kirby and the Forgotten Land, I was insanely hyped for this game ever since they first announced it at the October Direct of last year. I remember watching that. It was me, Lucas, and Thomas. All three of us were watching it together, and I lost it. I mean, I went ballistic. I want to say by the end of that trailer, I had like a headache because I screamed so much. I've been a Kirby fan for nearly 15 years now, longer than I've been a Sonic fan. I would say I'm a bigger Sonic fan, but I've been a Kirby fan for much longer, and seeing this franchise continue to grow and develop, and wanting and yearning for that 3D Kirby game, getting tastes of it in like Kirby Air Ride, Kirby 64, Star Allies were the final boss, and the world map were in 3D. Like, we've gotten little bits where they're like trying to do a bit of 3D, but not fully commit to it. And I remember all the way back when they finished Star Allies DLC, they were like, we want to take it. This is the end of the first chapter of Kirby with Star Allies, and like we want to start the second chapter of the franchise, starting with the next game. And that was back in 2018, so a while ago at this point. But skip forward a few years to this year, and we had Forgotten Land, probably one of the best games on the Switch. It's one I highly recommend to several people when they've gone to Switch this year. The gameplay is amazing. It's been insanely replayable. I think I've played through it 4 times this year. Two of those being 100% ones, one of those being the co-op one I did with Thomas, and another one I did a challenge one of it where it's no abilities, or as little abilities as I can get away with. Sometimes you're forced to use abilities, but I guess that was the main factor. It was really between Kirby and Sonic for me this year. And I think when I looked at it, I was like, I could see myself, if I sat down to play Kirby right now, I would be stoked. If I sat down to play Sonic again, I would be down to play it, but I wouldn't be as excited to play through Frontiers again as I would Forgotten Land. At least not right now. So that is why Kirby and Forgotten Land is my game of the year. I want to end off this discussion by talking about our prediction, one prediction, because we'll probably have a dedicated video to just general predictions for next year, but one prediction of what we think will be our game of the year going into next year. And this could be games that have already been announced, possibly games that haven't been announced but you think will come out next year. With this one, I'll go ahead and go first, since I'm springing this on to Thomas. For me, it's going to be Pikmin 4. Pikmin 4 is coming out next year. You know, we have Fire Emblem also coming out next year, and Zelda, and probably Odyssey too. Pikmin 4 is coming out next year. I love the Pikmin franchise, so that's when I think it's going to end up being like one of the top games next year. It's going to probably end up being my personal favorite, but that is to be seen. And I guess I'll go ahead and throw this over to Thomas, see what his pick is.
All I'm saying is, if they release another Pokemon game next year, I'm going to be very concerned.
Pokepark 3!
That's my prediction. But, no, I definitely have to say, I think I can already mark Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, as my game of the year.
That's definitely going to be one. I feel like next year for me is probably, like, we only know 3 of the Nintendo games for next year, so that's like 9 more extra games we'll probably get, along with various spin-offs thrown in. So we'll see what happens. But I feel like it's going to be between Zelda and Pikmin 4 next year for me. Not sure. Fire Emblem, I think Fire Emblem is always series I really enjoy, and I praise to the sun and back, but it's more just because a lot of people hate it because of Smash Bros. So I feel like I just kind of have to push
me
it more.
including.
Yeah. With Zelda, like, people got Zelda covered. Even though I like Zelda more than Fire Emblem, I don't have to push that franchise. You know, so that's kind of... That's why I push Fire Emblem so much. But, no, I think that's what's going to be between is Pikmin 4 and Zelda for me next year. But as we've seen, who knows? If we get Pokepark 3, that'll take the cake. That'll be like it'll be like Clubhouse games all over again. Only I'll care.
All I'm saying is, if we get an F-Zero game, I'm gonna show you my moves.
That would be amazing. Alright, and that is going to wrap up this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed our end of the year discussion. And just this year of the channel as a whole, it's been a blast. And I could not thank you all enough, including all of our amazing channel members. For as low as $1 a month, you could get videos such as this early, get emotes and rolls, and you can also get your name read out and have it on screen like these people. Dr. Wedden, Doshi Gaming, The Dark Matter, Apaparago, Carmen, Kenzlox20, The Whole Show, and Denmark. Thank you once again for everyone who was watching this. It's been a blast, and if you made it this far, feel free to subscribe. It's free. You can unsubscribe whenever you want. And let us know in the comment section below, what do you think will be your game of the year this year? Is it Kirby? Is it Pokemon? Sonic? Something we didn't even say? Was it I don't know. What's God of War? There you go. God of War Ragnarok, perhaps? Elden Ring?
Actually?
Yeah. Who knows? Let us know in the comments. But without further ado, we're going to wrap it up here. Y'all have yourselves a wonderful rest of y'all's night. And take care.
Unless you're watching this during the day.